Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today is time for Friday Reads on July 11th. I'm filming on Friday. Hopefully, this week I won't delete what I made. I've had much better luck. I think the string of bad luck last week with the videos, hopefully, knock on an old wooden desk, has come to an end. Let's just think good thoughts. I want to say thank you to everyone who checked in or sent messages and was concerned about me and my family here in Texas. People were not sure where we were in proximity to the terrible flooding that's been on the news wherever you happen to live. We were not affected by that weather here. It's about Kerrville, which was sort of the center of the hill country flooding, is a few hours from here. And then it's a pretty large area, the hill country. So the flooding in that particular town was the most intense with the summer camps and everything. And then the surrounding region had some problems as well that I think they're still working on the recovery efforts. My daughter lives in San Antonio, which is closer. She's about an hour or so away from that area. And she had a lot of heavy rain and I think some localized street flooding during that time period, but nothing scary. She was fine. And she and her boyfriend were going to go camping last weekend, not right there where the flood was, but in that general region and near another body of water. And they canceled that and rescheduled because the forecast was so bad. And then they saw what actually happened on the news. So we were all grateful that they made that change before getting down there and then realizing how bad it was. So yeah, I mean, just the news out of that area is just absolutely devastating and heartbreaking and awful. That's all I can say about that. It's just absolutely, unbelievably horrible. So let's go into this week's news and things to report. In television viewing, we are still watching Murderbot, and then we also watched a really good documentary this week about the one on HBO about Paul Reubens. And it gets into his entire history from childhood up through the Pee-wee years and beyond, and he's just a really interesting person. He passed away in 2023. Documentary filmmaker and the crew did not know that he was so ill when they were filming it. He concealed his illness. So they completed the project after his death, and it's really good. And then also it invoked a lot of nostalgia, but I recommend it very much. It's on HBO or Max or whatever the young folks are calling it these days. I think they're going back to calling it HBO. So that's where you'll find it. And then we're just gonna move right on into the books. I don't think there's anything in the world of the book whatever to report on. I am really enjoying the Booker Prize prediction videos. I think I might even like the prediction videos better than the real thing because I get all these great reading ideas. People will mention books that I've been thinking about reading and stuff I never heard about, and my list just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's almost anticlimactic when the actual list comes out, but I love that too. And I only ever end up reading about half of it, but for some reason I just get super hyped up about it every year. Let me know if you enjoy a good prize prediction list, or do you have any predictions? I make no predictions because I'm really bad at it. I guess I hope some books that I already want to read anyway get on the list, and then a couple of surprises. That's it. That's my prediction. Now, I really am going to talk about books. I finished one book last night, Austen Years, a Memoir in 5 Novels by Rachel Cohen. I first heard about this book on Hannah's channel, Hannah's Books, and something about the way she talked about this book made me know that I would love this book, and indeed I did. And it's a backlist book. I think I got this on Thrift Books for a few dollars, and it was published in 2020. And this book is for lovers of Austen's novels, people who enjoy rereading them. If you love the world of those books and you like to return to it, if you like to reread them, and if you're just a rereader in general and you like to consider new things that you hadn't noticed before, and you like to think about yourself when you're rereading, moving through life and the different stages that you are at and what that brings to repeated readings of favorite novels. That's the kind of person that this book is for. If you haven't read these Austen novels, you need to know that she talks about them freely. She's assuming that you are familiar with the plot and characters of these novels. She's not avoiding any spoilers. And I really love the way that she weaves together what we know about Austen's life and times and how the events in her family life and her personal life and world events that she would have been aware of at different times that she was writing the different novels, how those things may have filtered in somewhat into the plot, the settings, the characters, the mood, the theme. All of that's really interesting. She includes some biographical information about Jane Austen, some light literary studies of the novels, and then her personal memoir of what she was going through during a few years in her life where she was grieving for her father, his final illness, and then when he passed away, right between the births of her two children. So he got to know the first baby and not the second. And so these big life changes were happening. She married a friend that she had had since college, but they were just missed connections for years and years and years. They were never ready at the same time, but there was always something hanging in the air. And so when they finally got together, one of her friends even said, it's like an Austen plot. And so she chronicles that journey and then marrying and deciding to have children, and then but her father's illness, and she was very close to him. So all of this, if that sounds like the kind of swirl in a book that you enjoy, I found this deeply satisfying, and I love just spending all this time contemplating Jane Austen's life and then these novels and how those things could be informed and connected. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it there wasn't too much of anything. A lot of times a book like this, you'll feel at the end, oh, there was too much or not enough of one of those components, but I thought the balance was really good. It has definitely inspired me that I really do need to hit Mansfield Park sometime over the next year, because that's the one that I've only ever read one time. I read it for an adult ed class. After loving the other novels, it was when I was living in Dallas, and SMU would have these adult ed classes that I sometimes would take one for fun. And so there was one that was a Jane Austen class, and the book that we all read was Mansfield Park. It was kind of like a book club. We met a few times, and I was surprised at how much it was not my favorite book. And so I never did read it again, and it's time. After reading Cohen's reflections on that novel and seeing her love and attitude toward the other books that I really do love, now I want to read that one again. So she's inspired me. And also for Jane Austen July, I am reading Emma with the official read-along group, and it is so much fun. It's such a joy. We're only reading a couple chapters a day, and it's really nice to have someone to talk to read the chapters and then go in and see what people are saying, or if I have something that I want to say. And I'm just enjoying this pass through. And this is the first time I've ever read it with somebody else. So that's just really fun, because I've read it so many times, and now I get to see new things and enjoy rereading things that I always loved before. So that is continuing, and it is a pretty long book. It's a little over 400 pages in my edition, so it's also a book for Big Book Summer. Speaking of Big Book Summer, I am in the midst of another book, and it also qualifies. It's just a little bit over 400 pages, and it is as different from Emma as you possibly can get, because it is The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. And this book is not for the faint of heart. I am so engrossed in this book. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and this is what I'm really going to focus on this weekend, because it was hard to juggle 3 books this week. That's not really in my nature. But now that I have finished the memoir, this weekend I'm gonna cruise with my chapters of Emma and just let it rip with the Buffalo Hunter before I start my next book. So I know I'll have some final thoughts about it next week after I've actually finished it, but let me just describe a little bit about it. This book was a gift from my daughter for Mother's Day, and I had heard about it already, and I'd heard that people loved it, but I hadn't thought about it that seriously because it's a horror book, and I thought, and I heard it was really violent, and I thought, But she picked it out for me based on the strengths of reviews that I had not read yet. And then I saw those reviews and heard her rationale, and I thought, okay, you know what? I think this is a book for me. And so it's definitely kind of on the outer edges. It's past the outer edges of my comfort zone in terms of grisly, gory stuff, but that's not the main takeaway I want to give out here. Let me backpedal and describe. So this book also has so many things in it that I actually love in a novel. So the category is historical fiction, it's indigenous fiction, it's a Western, and it's a horror book. So some of those things are things I read fairly often and some are not, but it's also a story within a story within a story. I love this kind of structure. There is a woman named Etsy in 2012 who is a struggling professor of speech writing. She's struggling to get tenure, but she is lacking in publications. And fortuitously, at that particular juncture in her life, she finds out, and she's at the University of Wyoming, she finds out that in Montana, a manuscript has been found that it's an old journal found in the walls of a church that is being restored. And it belonged to her great, I don't know how many greats, grandfather. They have the same last name. It's an unusual French last name. And so they trace it to her, and this archivist in Montana is sending her the pages digitized so that she can read the journal. And she's all excited. She thinks, well, I don't know exactly what this is, but whatever this is what I'm going to write about, and this is going to be my publication. She's in the outer frame. Like we haven't come back to her yet, and I'm 2/3 of the way in. So I'm assuming that she reappears somewhere in the last part of this book. But she sets the frame, and we learn a little bit more about her than what I've told you, and then we're getting the content of the journal. And this has 2 parts. We have Arthur's story, or 3 persons, as Good Stab calls him. And he is a Lutheran pastor in Montana. It's 1912. He gives his sermons in German, and it's this little dinky town. This man starts coming to his Sunday sermons and staying afterward and telling him a story. And this is Good Stab, but he is a Blackfeet Indian man he comes in, he's wearing these long robes covering him all up, and sunglasses, which Arthur doesn't really understand because people don't wear sunglasses during this time. And he wants him to but blow out the candles. And they're sitting in the dark, and he says he has a confession to make, but it's going to take several sessions. And so he starts to tell his story. So we have Etsy's frame story, Arthur's story in alternating sections, and then Good Stab's story. Arthur's parts are very suspenseful because there's this growing sense of ominous dread in this little town as bodies start to appear, and they have been mutilated in a certain fashion. And so what is that? What does it mean? Who's doing it? Is there a meaning? Is there a message? And this strange man is coming in and telling him this story, and then he has his own personal demons. Sometimes his voice is funny, but there's hints of something darker underneath. And then we have the story that Good Stab is telling, his confessional, and that is the vampire story. So when you have heard that this is a vampire story, it's about Good Stab and what happens to him back about 50 years earlier. I'm gonna set it down. So it's Montana, and it is a dangerous and violent time with many, many conflicts between white soldiers, white trappers, white hunters, and the Blackfeet and other indigenous communities in the region. I had to stop and back up partway through and do a little bit of historical reading to get a grip on a couple of key events that are central to this story and are referred to that actually occurred. It's specifically the Maria's Massacre, also called the Baker Massacre. And so I recommend, if you read this book, make sure you know a little bit about that first, because it's important. Then we have this vampire story. So it's a tough story to read, not just because of the level of violence in Good Stab's narratives, but also the weight of the historical story. But I think that the fun part for Jones has to have been developing the vampire aspect, because if you're going to write a vampire story, you have every other vampire story that came before to consider. The accumulated lore of a vampire through all of the years and all of the cultures and all of the fictional stories and folklore stories, and then you get to add your own material. And so that's what happens. But Good Stab, the character, he doesn't know anything about, he's never heard of a vampire. He's never read a vampire story or seen a movie. He's living in the middle of the 1800s. So when it happens to him, when he encounters, well, I'm not even going to tell you, but the things that happen to him that result in him becoming an indigenous, vengeful vampire, he has to learn it on the fly. And that's one of the most interesting parts of, as far as it being a horror novel, is him having to come to terms and figure out how to sustain himself, what he has to do, all kinds of really disgusting cause and effect things that happen. So structurally, I love it. The voices are distinct. The two men and their stories, their reckonings, the tension that is created. It's just very well done. Even though it is outside my comfort zone, I am really into this. But it is very gory. There's just no way around it. If you cannot read that, it's going to be a tough go. Just the very, very, very first couple of pages, and a journal was found in a wall. Well, I was sold. Some old thing found in the wall of a building. Instantly, I'm hooked. I have to know. I've got to take the ride back. Hook, line, and sinker. So it's hard to say I'm having a good time, because it is just so dark. It is so dark, and so much of it is historically based. So it's not just dark like somebody wrote a scary story. It's a dark mirror, but it's really good. So what will I read next? Like I said, I'm going to focus on that. I didn't even have time for poetry this week because of the 3 books, but there is a poem I'm going to read this weekend, because while I was reading this, one thing that she referred to, I can't even remember. I've tabbed it. I'll have to go back and see in what context she happened to get onto this topic. But she referred to a Wordsworth poem, and it brought back a memory. I had not thought about this poem in years and years. And it's the one, part of the title is Lines Composed Above Tintern Abbey. Lines composed above Tintern Abbey. And then there's more to the title. There's a year in there and stuff. I'll put it up on the screen. But I have not thought about that poem in so long, but I had to perform that poem in a class in college. I took a class, and I've mentioned this class in the past, I think. It was called Literature in Performance, and the class was reading stuff out loud to an audience. And it ended up being a really good groundwork class for careers that I didn't know I had coming on the horizon. But we would get different assignments. We had to read at different times: poetry, prose, fiction, drama. And then there would be rules about the length and the time period. So at some point we had to read a poem. I think we had to read a poem published prior to the 20th century, and it had to be a certain length. It had to be a long poem. And somehow or another, I ended up with this poem. And oh my gosh, that class, you had to read it. You didn't exactly have to memorize it, but you kind of did, because you would get graded down if you looked at it too much. You had to have it with you, but you couldn't hold the book. You had to type the whole thing out on regular paper. You could have a notebook, like a binder. And you didn't get a lectern or a podium. You had to just stand there and hold this binder. And we learned that it was really important to put a bunch of extra paper in the binder and just put the thing you have in the middle, because it would hold your hand steady. And then you had to read and make eye contact and be dramatic and not look at your text very much. And I did that poem. And I don't remember it now, except I know that it started out something about 5 years have passed. So that's all I got. But I'm going to read it this weekend and see if it rings any bells or revives my memory, or even if I even like the poem. I don't remember it at all. So I'm going to read that poem. I'm going to read The Buffalo Hunter. And then after I finish with Buffalo Hunter, I think I need to hit up my next book for endless drama, and the aptly named Sweat by Lynn Nottage. It's not a book about the Texas summer. I think the sweat refers to some factory workers. It's about the sweat of hard work, not the sweat of trying to survive in Texas in July. But I think it's going to suit the week to come. So I don't know a lot about it, but I'll talk about it next week. And that is it. I don't know what else I'm going to embark on. There will be more. I just haven't decided. Stay tuned. We'll see what I have up my sleeves. But they're going to be short sleeves because it's really hot. Did I mention that it's hot? So I hope that you are doing well wherever you are. Let me know what you've been reading, thoughts on any of these books, what you have coming up. You want to throw in a book or prediction? Go for it, and I will be back soon. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.